Hi, friends, and welcome to 15241 Today Talk. And Jim Render and I have with us a dear friend, Terry Kushner. Listen to this resume, a guy that graduated from Clairton, then to Colgate, masters and doctorates from the University of Pittsburgh in curriculum supervision. 9 years math teacher at Moon, plus football coach. 3 years at Peters, math, football coach. 3 years at Trinity, assistant principal and football coach, and he said that wasn't a good mix. 2 years assistant principal at Baldwin, and 23 years at Upper St. Clair. Terry, we're honored to have you with us today. Thanks for joining us. And I'll just sit back, and you two educators can go off and talk for 30 minutes about...
I got to embellish on your resume.
On his resume?
Yes. Well...
No, just don't bring up the trick play at Trinity.
Oh, that's I got the... Anyhow,
we coached Lanny. We coached against each other a couple times, and he has a few notches on his belt. So go ahead. I yield to you.
You jumped in and told the... Anyhow, we have interacted in every capacity. You know, opponents, and then he was my boss, of course, as assistant principal, and then assistant superintendent. So we competed many times on and off the field, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
My personality and his did clash a few times.
And yet you're great friends.
One
That's
thing
right.
we figured out, that we were both going after the same end, but in different ways. And you forgot the last part, friends, ended up friends.
Yeah.
Great friends, yes.
So,
How was it that you decided that you wanted to get into education?
Oh, Lanny, that goes way back. My dad grew up in Clairton, and his junior year, his father passed away, and he had to go to work in the mill as soon as he graduated. But his desire was always to get into education. He wanted to be a teacher. Later on in life, he became a coach, and he spent a lot of years coaching Little League Baseball in Clairton. But I think it kind of was set in that means, in that way. And went to Colgate, majored in math, but wanted to get involved with dealing with young people. So I got the opportunity to teach and coach at Moon, and that started it. As a matter of fact, my sister is a special ed teacher in Montgomery County, Maryland, and my brother, who recently passed away, Jim got to know pretty well, was a principal at Brentwood. So it's in the genes.
Well, what do you find to be the best thing about being an educator?
Making a contribution, I think, and preparing young people to be citizens in our society. I find that to be the biggest reward. And I have kids and grandkids of my own, and I kind of use that preparation in dealing with them, too.
I wanted to tell you, this is a good little story in my opinion. When I first came there to Upper St. Clair, our principal was a guy by the name of Dr. Parnell Hoffman. And Dr. Hoffman was a unique character. He was a good educator, but a lot of times during the morning in particular, he wanted to talk sports. He wanted to talk football or baseball, whatever was going on. And so there was an assistant principal's job open, and he interviewed 5 or 6 guys, and he didn't particularly like any of them. See, so one day he says to me, "What do you know about Terry Kushner?" And I says, "Well, he's a good guy. We competed against each other, and good football guy. I think you'd like him." Well, Hoffman hired him. Bang.
That was it. Yeah.
Because he was a good educator, and I like to think, you probably know more about this than I do, I'd like to think he must have done some of his work at night, his correspondence or whenever, because it was not unusual by day that he wanted to talk football.
Also a very bright guy.
Yes,
he had
yeah.
a memory like a steel trap. Yeah, and a great guy to work for also, yes.
Good guy, why?
Because very well organized, and he didn't watch over me. He gave me a lot of rope, so to speak, and as long as we were doing our job, he never interfered. A good leader.
Well, this is such a great school district. Why do you think it is? And how did you feel you contributed to making it as outstanding a school district as it is?
Well, I'm glad you brought that question up, because I think the general public really doesn't understand the basics behind why Upper St. Clair is so great. First of all, we have great resources. I always like to use the analogy, it's like working for the Yankees. You have the best resources, but you better win the World Series. But
Great analogy.
way back, Niles Norman and Don Eichhorn really set the stage for the success at Upper St. Clair. Our curriculum development process here is unique, and no other school district that I'm aware of has a curriculum development process like we have. Every year, we revisit the curriculum and tweak it. And I've been associated with many other districts. And usually they review their curriculum in 5-year cycles. But in 5 years, a lot could change. Here at Upper St. Clair, it's dynamic. It happens every year. So that's kind of like the basis on the educational end. And then, of course, on the student end, we have some great kids. And probably my best contribution was not screwing them up. I think that's what I always tell Bill Pope. Preparing them. And I guess that kind of summarizes it, Lanny.
He mentioned Niles Norman. Niles Norman was the superintendent 41 years ago. One of his last official duties, he can be praised or damned, but one of his last duties was hiring me. And then Don Eichhorn, he was the founder of the middle school.
Right, he's the father of the middle school. As a matter of fact, the Don Eichhorn Award is a middle school award that's given annually to schools. It's named after him, and we're fortunate to have him here as assistant superintendent. And good leadership. Bill Pope, another great leader, had a lot of foresight as far as curriculum development and instruction, and good leadership.
You used the word preparation a moment ago. And I know you have taught college students as well. And you were saying earlier to Linda and me, Linda Dudzinski, our coordinating producer, that you feel strongly about, and I obviously perked up my ears when I heard that, because I believe that 85% of the success of a broadcast is determined by the preparation that you do before you get to the field and announce that game, or get to the gym to announce a game. So you feel strongly about the preparation for an educator.
Teacher preparation. As a matter of fact, that's basically what I do now. I still interact a lot with student teachers and teach a class or two at the university level. And I think it's important that at the university level that practitioners get involved with the instruction rather than being based on theory alone. And I think that's something has been missing in teacher preparation in the past. Getting practitioners involved, people who are out there actually involved on the ground with instruction of student teachers. And I see that happening more and more now, with student teachers being better prepared.
Can we move off of education again a little bit?
Sure.
Just don't bring up the trick play, that's all.
That's the second time you've told me that, so now I might as well tell it. I mean, he was the head coach at Trinity, and in those days, the sideline official, he didn't stand over on the sideline. If the widest guy was over there, then he'd move out on the field. So I don't know the basis of this play, but anyhow.
It was legal, too.
Yeah,
it was legal.
Yeah, it was legal. That's why the official gave you the devil after.
Ironically, it was a good friend of mine also, Pat Vitesse, yeah.
So anyhow, he had a player that came off and was on the outside of the official, between the official and the sideline.
So he really didn't come off the field.
Right, he was inside the sideline.
Yeah.
To make a long story short, we ran the play and we weren't very good. And the pass was underthrown. We completed it, but it wasn't very successful. But Jim was not happy.
He claims I came out on the field, I don't recall that, Lanny.
He was his usual calm self.
For both of you, what are the similarities between coaches and teachers?
Oh, coaching, teaching, synonymous. I mean, there's the very things that we did and do on the practice field and in games is what we do in preparing students in the classroom and assessing students. I'm big on assessment reform. I think that the way we grade kids needs to be reformed, and I think assessment should be ongoing and something that we do on an ongoing basis in athletics. So I think there are so many commonalities that a lot could be learned from observing coaches and practicing their art.
Well, now let's talk more about assessment reform. Where you're going when you talk about that?
Well, I'm big on not including extraneous things into grading that would distort reflection of student achievement. Like, I don't think things like attendance, behavior, homework, extra credit should be included in a grade. I think a grade should reflect student achievement, what they know or learn about the stated objective. These other things certainly are part of growth and should be emphasized in education, but in another way. I grew up, first 8 years of my education, I went to a Catholic school, and we gave 2 grades. One was the academic grade, one was the comportment deportment grade. And when I brought those grades home, my parents looked at both of them carefully. So I think something like that ought to be incorporated into our system so that there's no distortion of what a kid knows. I always use the example of, would you want a surgeon working on you that didn't know chemistry but did a good job on attendance and homework? You'd kind of like both. So that's one part of the reform. The other thing is I'm big on formative assessment, assessing students with questions, quizzes. It's not always about big tests, and it should be ongoing and on a daily basis.
Agree with that?
Well, yes, I do. I think the point he makes about, a lot of teachers that I've been, they're famous for saying you can get extra quality points by doing such and such of homework, mundane, whatever. But he's right. That doesn't really reflect their knowledge of the subject. And, and I think the original part of the question, I think football coaches are very good at evaluating what they know.
Exactly.
They have to determine, or they have to show what they know on Friday nights. It can't be about running extra laps.
Jim, that's a great analogy there. And I have to tell you, to me, I'm not big on the one and done. I'm big on second, third, fourth. They call it second chance learning. I think it's more than that. If a student doesn't get it the first time around, it's our responsibility to assess the need and fix it. I always use the analogy in my classes. To me, there are 2 kinds of teachers. There's the dealer and the doctor. The dealer is like the blackjack dealer down at the casino. Deal out the cards. The dealer has 20, you have 19, you have 21. You lose, you win, and you collect the cards up again. And some people lose and leave the table, other winners.
And the dealer has to take a card that's all determined, right?
Right,
Okay.
but the point is they're winners and losers and they move on. And then there's the doctor. The doctor is like my doctor. I went for an exam, my blood pressure was sky high. So she said, here, I want you to take this, get this prescription and take these tests. I'll see you in 3 days. So I went, got the prescription, took the test, came back in 3 days. She took a look at the results and said, okay, we're going to tweak that prescription, change it a little, and I want you to take these other tests now, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Same thing, came back in 2 weeks, my blood pressure was still a little up, and she said, okay, this prescription is good, and now I'm going to give you some exercises and diet. She didn't just take me on the first visit and say, here, go get these pills, good luck, hope you don't have a stroke. And to me, I want doctors as teachers who diagnose and prescribe. Diagnose and prescribe. That's what we do on the football field, Jim.
I was going to say, the guy who was my mentor as a football coach, he used to say, if they don't know it, you haven't taught it. In other words, the onus was always on me,
Right.
not the kid.
Right.
And he was very unique in trying different approaches until the kid
That's what it's all about.
learns it.
Exactly, diagnose and prescribe. I always tell my student teachers, when a kid fails, two people fail. That student and you. That's what it's all about. It's about the kid. It's not about the teachers. That's a great analogy, Jim.
Do you think that most teachers at the high school and college level agree with what you're saying as it relates to assessment?
No, they don't. And it's a difficult task convincing them. I do a teacher leader workshop with several other educators at Point Park, and this is one of the themes that we really stress. And after a lot of work and data, you could get the teachers to come around on it, but it's a difficult task because let's face it, this is where our parents were brought up, and it worked for them. This is the way it worked for us, so this is the way we're going to do it. One and done. There are the ones that get it, and the ones that don't, then you move on. But to me, that's not the way it should be. It's about diagnosing and prescribing. It's difficult. It's a difficult sell. It's tough, and I tell teachers, if you do this right, this is a tough job. This is called work, and it's not easy.
You should be teaching more of these college courses.
Well, thanks.
You did do some work down at Waynesburg,
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Lanny spoke in a couple of my classes. Very nice communications classes. Now I'm doing secondary math methods, and I don't know if Lanny would help out. What do you think?
Sure, I can adjust my program to. And one of the things that I strongly believe now that I've been teaching 10 years at Waynesburg is that point you made about knowledge. Is I want to make sure that my students know things that from a broadcast standpoint, for example, as it relates to communications, there aren't any guarantees to be successful in broadcasting, but there is one thing that can enhance your ability, and that is how well-rounded are you as an individual? How much knowledge do you have that's going to benefit you as a communicator?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
Terry also has been involved with the WPIL. At one point, you were on the board.
Right, the Board of Control.
And then he's
been involved for about 30 years now, yeah.
Really?
Right. I got on the football committee shortly after I came to St. Clair and served on that for a while, as you know, with wet footballs and narrow.
Is that why we always seem to play at North Allegheny?
That's part of it, yeah. That's also why you only got 2 footballs and goalposts.
That was ace.
Which I know.
But he's also been on the Hall of Fame committee.
Right.
And the Scholarship
Committee, right. Yeah. As a matter of fact, we're in the process now. We're looking at I have about 137 applications that we're going through to pick 10 young ladies and 10 young men for the WPIL scholarships. This year, the 2002 Upper St. Clair State Soccer Championship team is going to be going into the WPIL Hall of Fame. So last year was a great year for Upper St. Clair. We had Sean Casey, Sean Lee, and the distinguished James Render get into the WPIL Hall of Fame.
I got drug in on the coattails of those other guys.
I was there that night. That was a great night. It was fabulous night. You were talking about the WPIAL. It seems to me that those people that are part of the WPIAL and the PIAA, those are very, very challenging positions, and it seems to be always that people have opinions as to what those two organizations are doing wrong. What are your thoughts about the criticism?
Yeah, it's easy to be on the outside and critical of what's going on. A lot of people don't understand all the underpinnings, the rules, regulations, and so on, and it's difficult. Tim O'Malley's a good friend, and he's the executive director who will be leaving at the end of the year, retiring. But I always tell Tim, his position is a lot like being a principal or superintendent, making tough calls, making tough judgments. And he has a board that helps out, made up of educators, coaches, officials, that help with the execution of the contracts or the bylaws and so on.
He's going to be a future guest on the Jim and Lanny talk show.
Good choice. Good man.
Tell us about your family.
I have 5 grandchildren. My wife and I live in South Strabane Township. We have 3 grandchildren who live here in Upper St. Clair. They're at Streams, and 2 in Char Valley, so I'm spoiled. I get to see them whenever I want. And my daughter-in-law just recently took a job at Streams. She's working as a resource teacher there. My wife and I have been married for, let's see, we got married on the day that Franco caught the Immaculate Reception.
Is that
So,
right?
yeah, as a matter of fact, that's easy to remember, December 23rd, 1972. As a matter of fact, we got a chance to meet Franco and mention that. And he says, well, I guess you'll never forget that Immaculate Reception. Yeah. So
December
we're originally
72, so you're coming up on, 48?
Right, we're coming up on 48. Yeah.
Franco turned 70 the other day.
Yeah, I mentioned that to Pam. Yeah.
Your children, what are they doing?
My son went to Penn State. My daughter went to Pitt, so we have that back and forth. He has an MBA from the University of Pittsburgh. He works for Dick's out in Moon Township on the campus out there. He's a planner, and he's in golf, and he has a very responsible position there. My daughter went to Pitt and got her master's from the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs. She majored in Spanish. And to this day regrets the fact that she didn't become a Spanish teacher. But she worked at FedEx for a lot of years, and when her children got older and went to school, she retired from FedEx. Now she works for Stitch Fix because she could work at home. And my daughter-in-law, Carrie, I'm blessed. My daughter-in-law and son-in-law are the best. Jim knows both of them, but he probably knows my son-in-law more. He's with me at all the events that we go to. He's an architect, and he's a partner at IKM. He did the high school project at Char Valley and also the St. Clair Hospital on 19, Ruby Memorial down in Morgantown. So, nice family.
Very loyal Upper St. Clair booster fans.
Yes.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, my son and daughter-in-law moved here because of the schools. They live over on Monterey.
You didn't have any influence on that, did you?
Well, I think the influence came in talking so positively about the district and enjoying what I have done over the years here.
The two of you being friends, and I guess I'm thinking of some of my friendships. Have you over the years spent a lot of time, do you spend a lot of time, or have you spent a lot of time, the two of you, talking about coaching philosophies, teaching philosophies?
We talk about everything from A to Z. Jim?
Yeah, we go to breakfast periodically and rehash what we did, and then we bang away at what they ought to be doing.
Right, exactly. We have all the answers now. Kind of like people critical of WPIL. We have all the answers. So, being retired, it's one of the benefits, I guess. Huh?
Yeah, we got more than 25 seconds to make a decision. On what play to call.
Right. Same thing with high school principal. I personally think that that's probably the most difficult position in a school district. Having served in all the capacities, you don't have a lot of time for wait time, think time. You have to make snap decisions, critical snap decisions. And let's face it, the high school, too, is always the flagship of the school district. And it's a tough job. Dealing with a lot of people, you're responsible for a lot of students. When you work in central office, it's a tough job, of course. Being superintendent is very difficult. You're responsible for the whole operation, basically. But you often get think time, and you have people that could help you with the decisions.
That's a great point, I think, having been in this business a while. The fact that, like, when you're the principal of high school, if there's a kid involved or a teacher, you sometimes have to make a quick decision.
Right.
Along that line, Terry, if you could go back, do you have a favorite job of the ones you had?
High school principal at Upper St. Clair, my absolute favorite job. It was probably the toughest and most rewarding. My wife often says, psychologically, you left St. Clair when you went to central office, because I missed the interaction with the kids, with the teachers, with the coaches, all the activities and so on. By far, my most favorite job was being a high school principal at Upper St. Clair.
When you were the principal at Upper St. Clair, what percentage of the time were you in your office? What percentage of the time were you in the halls?
I tried not to be in my office. Well, first of all, I was blessed with fantastic coworkers, secretaries. I never saw them as being my secretary. They were always like my partner, and they would always be very helpful with me in stressful situations. And I'd get out of my office when I felt that the job was starting to catch up with me. And my favorite thing was to get over into the library or the resource center or up into the cafeteria or over to the nurse's office or the AD's office and to interact with kids. I always try to learn the name of a lot of kids, and when we signed the diplomas at the end of the year, I always tried to keep track of how many of the kids I actually knew. And one thing I did that I think, and when I teach classes with principalships, every month I'd ask my secretary to pick 20 kids, 5 kids from every class that we didn't know, not the great students, the stars, not the bad kids, but 20 of the kids, and we had breakfast with the principal once a month. So that's 20 kids times 10 months. That's 200 kids that you get a chance to see that you really wouldn't pick up along the way.
Well, that's a great idea.
I think every principal ought to do something like that. I got to know a lot of kids that way.
We're about out of time. If you could do it again, any changes you would have made in your career? Anything you would have done differently?
I wouldn't change anything different in my life. There are a lot of glitches along the way, mistakes that I made. When I look back, some of the moves I made didn't make sense, but they all worked out. And I'm just happy to be here. Thank you guys it's an honor being interviewed by the two of you.
It's our honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. What a career. People are critical of principals. Somebody's always taking a shot at the principal. I don't think I ever heard very much criticism of him. Everybody liked him, first of all. Maybe didn't agree with all the decisions, but they liked him. I think that says a lot about it.
Well, you're a good example. Not always agreeing with decisions, but we're friends. Yeah. And to me, that's a challenge, but that's what it's all about. It's a skill. It's not easy, to make tough decisions. But another thing that I always like to tell principals, you don't want the first interaction with parents to be a negative. You want to get to know the parents ahead of time so that they know more about you and build some trust. If it's always the first time it's a negative delivery, it's not going to work.
Terry, thanks very much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
A good friend, Terry Kushner, joining us, a gentleman that for 23 years was a part of Upper St. Clair. Still, his heart is very much in this community. Thank you for joining us for this edition of 15241 Today Talk. Our producer-director is Glenn Ward, and our coordinating producer, Linda Dunzinski. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And if you have any comments or questions for us, please don't hesitate letting us know. Thank you.